Let me tell you something I never thought I'd see. Two barefoot girls on a morning cold enough to kill, standing right where the wind cuts through Main Street like a bad memory. Clutching a bundle so tight it could have been gold or grief. Yeah, that happened. And if you'd asked anyone in town that day, they'd have sworn nothing ever moved in that kind of winter. Not unless it had to. But you know what I mean. Sometimes what shouldn't happen is exactly what does. I was in the saddle, boots numb and brain half blank, when I spotted them. At first, I thought they were just sacks. Honestly, that's how still they stood, backs to the world, not even shivering. But as I got closer, my heart skipped a little. Two girls, no taller than a fence rail. Faces blotchy red from cold, hands tucked into thin cotton dresses, and between them, a kitten, ears twitching, wrapped in a scrap of wool like a last prayer. "You two all right out here?" I asked, and it sounded too loud in all that hush. The taller girl, maybe 3 or 4, blinked slow, like the question was something she had to remember how to answer. The other kept her eyes on her shoes, toes poking out. I swung down and crouched low. "Where's your mama?" They looked at each other like they were checking it was okay to say. The little one whispered, "She's buried." I swear. The kitten made a sound like it understood. Turns out, their dresses were for spring, not winter. Their skin, cracked raw. I asked their names, June and Daisy. Flowers trying to bloom in frost. I told them to show me. They led me behind the stores, past the churchyard where the snow sat heavy on the old iron gates, past where everyone else stopped caring. I followed, boots sinking. And those girls barely left a mark, light as ghosts. We stopped at a pine grove, snow-mounded strange, a corner of shawl poking through. June knelt, brushed back snow, and there she was, their mother. Half frozen, but not yet gone. Now, let me back up a sec. When I saw her face, something inside me twisted, and not just from pity. Her name was Willa, and years ago, she was the only thing that ever made me believe in luck. The night before our wedding, she vanished. Folks said she ran. I never believed it. Now, here she was, buried in ice, eyelids fluttering. I called her name, barely a whisper. For a second, I swore I saw her lips move. I lifted her, careful as I could. The girls followed without a sound. We went to my place. The fire cracked loud in the hearth. The girls curled up on an old army blanket, the kitten tucked under Daisy's arm like a promise. Willa, she barely stirred at first. I fed her warm broth. Tried not to let the hurt in my chest show. When she finally spoke, her voice was all splinters and truth. I tried to get back. I didn't run. I was taken. 7 years gone, just like that. She rested while the girls slept, and for the first time in forever, I felt hope leak back into the room. I told her about the locket I kept, the one that always smelled faintly of roses. Even after all these years, her hand found mine under the blanket, a touch lighter than a feather, and in that moment, it was like the world shifted, pain sliding out to make space for something gentler. Morning brought pale gold light, the kind that makes old scars look softer. Willa looked stronger. The girls' laughter echoing in the next room, kitten tumbling after a scrap of string. But you could still see it in her eyes, a shadow, a doubt, the ache of too much survival. When I brought her breakfast, she winced as she sat up, skin marked by stories she'd never chosen. "You never came," she whispered, voice small as hope. "There was nowhere to go," I said. She told me then. Her father sold her to pay a debt. They'd tied her wrists, hauled her north to some godforsaken cabin, left her with a man who believed pain was the same as power. For years, she did what she had to. Kept quiet, kept alive, never stopped whispering my name, even if only to God. She showed me the locket I'd never opened, her face inside, bright and wild from a time before. The girls, she said, came after she escaped, worked as a washerwoman, gave birth on a church floor. No help, just cold boards and harder prayers. Some folks showed a bit of mercy, but never enough. When the snow came, she tried to get south, but collapsed, told June and Daisy to find someone kind. Turns out, they did. A knock rattled the door, sheriff bell. News spreading fast as wildfire in a dry field. "We heard a woman was seen here, Silas. Folks are talking." He tried to warn me the town wouldn't like it, wouldn't let it lie. I told him I didn't care. When I came back in, Willa was ready to leave, already making plans to disappear again, just to keep us safe. But I wasn't having it. "You're not leaving. Not this time." That Sunday, I hitched the wagon and rode into town with Willa beside me, the girls and Kitten in the back. Folks stared, whispers sharp as thorns, but I said it loud enough for every busybody to hear. This is my fiancée. She was taken. Now she's home. And these are her daughters, which makes them mine. The silence cracked. Then Miss Tilly from the boarding house stepped forward, nodded at Willa, and promised eggs and coats. Others followed, small kindnesses blooming where I least expected. We married 2 weeks later, just us, the girls, the wind, and vows that meant more for being said in quiet. I put the locket back around her neck. You said my name all those years, I whispered. Well, I said yours too. She smiled. Tears caught on her lashes, and for the first time in forever, it felt like life was something you could hold on to, not just survive. That night, we sat by the fire, girls curled under a quilt, Kitten sprawled and snoring. I said, I think this is what forgiveness feels like. Willa just put her hand over mine. The world outside was still cold, still sharp, still full of eyes waiting for us to fail. But inside, we had a fire, and she, once buried by snow and silence, finally had a home. But, not everyone believes in second chances, or in the kind of justice that isn't written down in a ledger. Some folks kept their distance, others whispered when we passed, and there were always more winters coming. So what do you think? Really, when it comes to love, forgiveness, or the right to start again, whose side are you on? Is there ever such a thing as justice? Or do we just build it out of what we've got left? Let me know down below. Who deserves a place by the fire, and who still needs to stay out in the cold? They say winter always leaves a mark, but what they don't say is that sometimes spring doesn't come easy either. You'd think, after all we'd been through, things might settle, like all that cold would finally let us be. But you know how small towns work. People talk. Folks stared when Willa and I walked into the general store, the girls trailing behind. Daisy clutching the kitten like it was her last anchor to anything good. Conversation stopped. Old Mr. Landry, who never had a kind word for anyone under 40, nodded once, but didn't meet my eyes. I could feel their judgment sticking to my back like sleet. But Willa, she kept her chin up, hair tied back just so, a threadbare shawl covering the bruises that hadn't quite faded. Some looked away out of shame, but others just looked, trying to find cracks in the story, waiting for us to prove their gossip right. But there's always someone willing to break the spell. Miss Tilly, again, this time with a bag of flour and a handful of hard candy for the girls. She leaned close and whispered, Don't let them freeze you out, honey. Some folks are all mouth, no heart. The girls beamed at the candy, June holding hers like a jewel, and for a minute, you could almost believe it would be okay. We set about making a life, patching up the cabin. And every Sunday, she'd sit in the very back, June and Daisy pressed to her side, the kitten, now bold enough to roam, making friends with the barn cats. And I took odd jobs. Mostly hauling and fence mending, never too far from home. The old men at the feed store still muttered, but I let it slide. One night, though, just as the last light was slipping out of the sky, Sheriff Bell showed up again, hat in hand, face drawn. Silas, there's talk you ought to hear. He glanced at Willa, then back at me. There's a man, claims he's looking for someone. Says he's owed property, and he's got papers. My fists clenched. Willa's hand trembled in mine, but she didn't pull away. He's staying at the boarding house. Calls himself Mr. Archer. Ring any bells? I shook my head, but Willa's breath hitched, so soft I almost missed it. That was the name, she whispered. The man who bought me. Just like that, the warmth in the room vanished. Daisy curled up tighter, sensing the change, the kitten burying itself beneath the blanket. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak outside the window sounded like trouble. Around midnight, I heard the boards on the porch groan. I got up, shotgun in hand, but when I eased open the door, there was no one, just a scrap of paper weighted with a stone. She belongs to me. I'll collect what's mine by Sunday. No signature, but the threat was all teeth. Next day, the wind changed. People who'd started thawing out grew cold again, whispering about debts and proper owners. Sheriff Bell did what he could. He always did, but you could see the doubt in his eyes. Even Miss Tilly started locking her doors after sunset. It was as if fear had seeped into every crack of our new life, and I hated how quickly it worked. But here's the twist, and maybe you saw it coming, maybe not. June, quiet as moonlight. Had seen the man. She told me, voice shaking but sure. He's got a scar here. She pointed to her jaw. He was at the church, asking questions. Willa paled. If he finds us. But I shook my head. He won't. That Saturday, I rode to town, heart in my mouth, ready for a fight if I had to. Found Mr. Archer at the saloon, slick as oil, wearing a city coat. He tried to look past me, like I was just part of the furniture. I'm here for what's mine, he said, waving papers like holy writ. That woman. Her brats. I paid good money. I cut him off. She ain't yours. Not then. Not now. And if you think a piece of paper's going to buy you another day in this town, you've misjudged more than just me. He laughed, loud, ugly. Law's the law. You want to stand in its way? The whole room went still. Then Sheriff Bell stepped up behind me, hand on his sidearm. You want to test the law? You'll find we've changed a bit since you were last here. He looked the man dead in the eye. You've got till sunset to leave, or we'll show you just how much this town remembers. Mr. Archer spat on the floor, but left, muttering about lawsuits and curses, but no one stopped him. Outside, I watched as he packed his bags, the townsfolk silent. But something shifted. Maybe it was the way Miss Tilly stood in her doorway, arms folded, or the way June slipped her hand in mine. But I knew we'd turned a corner. Back home, Willow waited, hope and fear tangled in her eyes. I told her what happened, how the sheriff and the town, against all odds, stood up. She cried then, not like before, but with relief, and when she laughed through her tears, I thought maybe, just maybe, the cold was finally breaking. That night, the four of us, and the kitten, fat and happy, sat by the fire. Daisy asked, "Is he gone?" And I nodded. He won't bother us again. Willa tucked the girls in, humming a tune I hadn't heard since before it all went wrong, her voice a little stronger now. Outside, the last snow was melting, running in thin silver streams under the door. Later, when the house was quiet, she found me on the porch. You still believe in forgiveness? She asked, voice gentle. I shrugged. I believe in you. She smiled, leaned against me, both of us watching as dawn crept over the hills, turning everything gold. Funny thing is, some folks never came around. There were still whispers, still doors closed, still eyes that watched us like we didn't belong. But the ones who mattered, the ones who brought eggs or candy or just a smile, made all the difference. And sometimes, that's all you need. So, here's where I leave it for now. The world outside still judges, but inside our walls, we built something stronger. Family, a little messy, a little wild, but ours. And as for justice, maybe it isn't what's written in a book. Maybe it's what you do when no one's looking, when you choose kindness over spite, courage over silence. What would you have done if you'd been in my boots? Would you risk it all for a second chance at home, or let the world decide what's right? Go on, tell me, do you believe folks can change? Or is forgiveness just another kind of winter waiting to come again? Let's talk.